Here is your new original title and script. The freedom you spent a lifetime earning and still won't let yourself use. Something happened in one of my client meetings not long ago that I genuinely can't stop thinking about. I was sitting with a husband and wife, both in their early 60s, both in excellent health, house fully paid off, retirement savings right where they needed to be. By every single measure I use in my work as a financial planner, these two were thriving. But when I leaned across the table and asked them, genuinely, sincerely asked them, whether they were actually enjoying this season of life, they went quiet. They looked at each other with this strange hesitation, and eventually one of them said something that absolutely floored me. They said they felt like they needed someone to tell them it was okay. Not more money, not better investments. Permission. And here's what really hit me. That's not a rare conversation. That's almost every conversation I have. I'm GeraldTalks, and I've spent years working with people on the financial side of retirement. The tax efficiency, the drawdown strategy, the income planning, and all of that matters deeply. But something I think we talk about far too little is the sheer, staggering, almost incomprehensible magnitude of what retirement actually is. Not the spreadsheet version, the human version. Because if you are retired, or approaching retirement, you are holding in your hands something that virtually every human being who ever walked this earth was never given. And most people are so tangled up in worry and guilt and anxiety that they can barely feel it. So today I want to step back from the numbers, just for a moment, and talk about the gift itself, what it means, why we struggle to receive it, and how to actually start living it. Let's start with some history, because I think the context here is genuinely mind-altering. For nearly the entirety of human civilization, the idea of retirement simply did not exist. It wasn't a concept. It wasn't a goal. It wasn't even a dream people allowed themselves to have. You worked. In the fields, in the factories, in the mines, in whatever grueling capacity your era demanded. And you kept working until your body refused. Then you depended on whoever would take you in. And then you died. That was the full arc for the overwhelming majority of our ancestors. When Germany became the first country to introduce a state pension system in 1889, the qualifying age was set at 70. The average person was dying well before they ever reached it. When the UK introduced its own pension in 1908, the numbers weren't much different. The entire architecture of retirement benefits was designed around the statistical reality that very few people would survive long enough to collect them. Go back through your own family history, 2 or 3 generations, and think honestly about what you find. Most of them worked until illness stopped them. There was no leisure phase, no slow mornings with a coffee in the garden, no weekend trips just because they felt like it. There was labor, then decline, then death. For thousands of years across nearly every culture on the planet, that was the human story. And then something changed. Medicine improved, living standards rose, life expectancy climbed in ways no one predicted. And suddenly, for the first time in history, ordinary people, not royalty, not aristocrats, not the extraordinarily wealthy, ordinary working people started surviving well past the point where they had to earn their keep. Today, a man in the UK who retires at 66 can statistically expect to live to around 84, a woman to roughly 86. That's close to 2 full decades of life after the job ends. Some of you watching this are looking at 25 or even 30 years of retirement stretching ahead of you. Let that number breathe for a second. 30 years. Your grandparents, if they were fortunate, might have managed 5. You could have 6 times that. This is not a minor improvement in the human condition. This is a revolution. And you are the first generation in history that doesn't just get more time. You get to choose what to do with it. You can decide where you live, who you spend your days with, what you do every single Wednesday morning. That level of sovereignty over your own later life is genuinely without precedent in the entire span of human existence. So what do people do when they're handed this extraordinary thing? Mostly they worry about losing it. They second-guess whether they're spending too much. They feel guilty on Tuesday afternoons when their old colleagues are still grinding. They hoard. They shrink. They defer the living in favor of protecting the logistics. And here's the tragic irony buried in all of that. The data consistently shows that retirees are among the happiest people in the entire country. The UK's Office for National Statistics has found repeatedly that retired people score higher than any other demographic on measures of happiness, life satisfaction, and sense of purpose. Retirees average around 7.75 out of 10 for happiness, nearly 6% higher than people still in the middle of their working years. Independent research from 2025 found that over half of retirees rate their life satisfaction at 8 out of 10 or above, compared to only about a third of working-age adults. And there's a deeper pattern underneath all of this that researchers have been documenting for decades. If you plot human happiness across a lifespan, you get what's called a U-curve. Well-being tends to be reasonably high in youth, dips into a trough in the middle years, the 40s and 50s, when the pressure of careers and mortgages and aging parents and competing responsibilities is at its most intense. And then it climbs back up sharply from the 60s onward. The statistical peak of human happiness isn't your 20s. It isn't your 30s. It's your 70s. Read that as many times as you need to. The decade that our culture often treats as a slide toward invisibility is, by the numbers, the richest decade of emotional well-being most people will ever experience. Now, I want to be transparent about something. Recent research suggests this U-curve may be shifting for younger generations, who are reporting higher rates of anxiety and dissatisfaction than previous cohorts did at the same age. That's a serious and complicated story that deserves its own honest conversation. But it doesn't diminish where you are. If anything, it throws what you have into even sharper relief. And I also don't want to pretend retirement is effortless for everyone. Loneliness is real. Loss of identity is real. Health challenges are real. But the broad picture is unmistakable. For most people who reach it, retirement is a happier chapter than anything that came before it. So what drives that happiness? Researchers have identified a few consistent factors: the autonomy of controlling your own time, the reduction in social comparison that comes when you're no longer measured against colleagues, the emotional maturity that genuinely grows with age. But the single most powerful contributor, accounting for roughly 40% of the well-being boost retirement provides, is simply this: more time to seek out meaningful experiences. Not a bigger account balance, not a nicer house. Time. The freedom to fill your days with what actually matters to you. And yet, despite all of this, so many people sit in retirement feeling guilty, uncomfortable, or vaguely like they're getting away with something they haven't earned. There's a psychological concept worth naming here: receiver's discomfort. When someone gives you something far more generous than you expected, the natural human response isn't pure delight. It's awkwardness, guilt, the sense that you don't deserve it. Retirement triggers exactly that response. Your past self worked and sacrificed and saved to hand your present self this gift, and your present self keeps handing it back, saying, "No, I couldn't possibly." But there's something even more specific going on, and I think this is the key insight that unlocks everything for most people I work with. You spent somewhere between 30 and 40 years being shaped, conditioned really, to be a saver. Every payslip, every pension contribution, every financial decision you made reinforced the same identity. I am someone who defers gratification. I protect resources. I do not spend carelessly. That identity isn't a bug. It's why you have what you have. It's the whole reason you made it here. But retirement asks you to do something that feels almost neurologically impossible. To become, almost overnight, someone who spends. And your brain, specifically the deeply ingrained loss aversion that makes losses feel approximately twice as painful as equivalent gains feel good, is not ready for that switch. Watching a portfolio value decline, even because you spent the money on something extraordinary, triggers the same alarm as losing something involuntarily. The math says you're fine. The wiring says danger. That internal conflict is not weakness. It is not irrationality. It is the entirely predictable result of the person your life built you to be, now trying to operate in circumstances your life never prepared you for. There are a few other friction points worth naming quickly. The loss of professional identity hits harder than most people anticipate. When your answer to, "What do you do?" changes from a confident job title to something uncertain, it can feel like a quiet erosion of self. The loss of structure matters too. Work gave you a rhythm, a reason to show up, a built-in social architecture, and without it, the weeks can lose their shape in ways that feel unexpectedly disorienting. None of these are character failures. None of them are permanent. They're the adjustment cost of stepping into something genuinely new, the friction of unwrapping the gift before you can actually use it. So what does it actually look like to receive retirement well? Let me share what I've consistently seen make the biggest difference. First, prioritize experiences over possessions. The research here is consistent across decades and cultures. Experiences generate lasting happiness. Things don't. Memories of shared adventures, of trying something new, of being fully present with people you love. These compound over time in a way that objects simply cannot. I have worked with people in the final chapters of their lives, and not once has anyone told me they wished they'd bought better furniture. But I've sat with plenty of people who carried regret about the trips they kept saying they'd take next year. Book it. Go. Second, don't eliminate structure. Replace it with something you've chosen. The happiest retirees I know don't have completely empty calendars. They have flexible structure, a standing commitment to a walking group, a weekly volunteering shift, a course they're working through, something that gives the week anchors without turning it into another job. Volunteering deserves particular mention. Research consistently shows that retirees who volunteer report substantially higher well-being than those who don't. The combination of purpose, social connection, and contribution does something for the human psyche that leisure alone simply cannot replicate. Third, invest in relationships like they're your most important asset. Because they are. When retirees are asked what makes them happiest, people come first by an enormous margin. Not money, not travel, not hobbies. People. And retirement offers something profoundly rare. The time to be genuinely, unhurriedly present with the people who matter most to you. No more fitting visits into leftover weekends. No more half-distracted conversations while you're mentally already somewhere else. But this one doesn't happen automatically, especially if most of your social life was organized around work. It requires intention. Reach out. Initiate. Call the friend you've been meaning to call for 2 years. Fourth, give yourself permission to be a beginner at something. You spent your career being competent. Now you get to be delightfully terrible at watercolor painting, or conversational Italian, or the guitar, with no professional stakes attached. That's not just fun. It's genuinely protective. Cognitive research consistently shows that learning new skills in later life is one of the strongest tools we have for maintaining mental sharpness and reducing dementia risk. Something that's enjoyable, fulfilling, and medically beneficial is a genuinely rare combination. Don't waste it. Fifth, and this one might be the most important shift of mindset I've ever seen produce a real change in someone's experience. Don't retire from something, retire to something. Most people frame retirement as an exit, and that framing gives you a few weeks of relief and then leaves you standing in the middle of your own life wondering what it's for. The retirees who flourish are the ones who reframe it as an arrival. They're not escaping a career. They're finally reaching something they've been building toward. Maybe it's grandchildren. Maybe it's a passion that got sidelined for 3 decades. Maybe it's a place or a project or a version of themselves they never had enough time to become. Before anything else, before the drawdown strategy, before the tax planning, answer this question honestly. What am I retiring to? If you don't have a clear answer, that is the work. That is the most important financial and life planning question you can spend the next month sitting with. And sixth, stop benchmarking your retirement against other people's highlight reels. Social media has created a very specific kind of misery for retirees. A curated parade of someone else's villa in the south of France, their round-the-world cruise, their perpetual golden hour beach photos. The research is unambiguous. Happiness in retirement correlates almost not at all with income level, and very strongly with health, relationships, and a sense of meaning. Some of the most quietly joyful retirees I've ever known live simply and modestly. Some of the most hollow ones have more money than they could spend in 3 lifetimes. Your retirement doesn't need to match anyone else's version. It just needs to be honest to yours. Now, I know that some of you have been watching this and thinking, yes, but Gerald talks. I'm still worried about the money. And I hear that completely. The financial mechanics of retirement matter, and I've covered them in depth elsewhere. Drawdown sequencing, the spending patterns that research shows actually play out across retirement. Why most people's money will outlast their worst fears. Go and watch those if the numbers are still keeping you up at night. But the one thing I want you to hold from today is this. The money is not the gift. The money is the packaging. The gift is time. The gift is Tuesday mornings with nowhere to be. The gift is choosing, for the first time since childhood, how your day unfolds. The pension pot, the ISA, the state pension, those are the tools that make the gift accessible. But if you are so focused on guarding the tools that you never open what they were built to protect, then something has gone very wrong with the whole arrangement. Here's a question I sometimes sit with my clients on. If you died tomorrow with a significant sum unspent, money that was always earmarked for living, would that feel like a victory? Would the people who love you look at that number and think, good, I'm glad they held on to it? Money that is never lived is not really yours. It's a number on a screen temporarily. The goal was never the number. The goal was always the life the number was supposed to fund. And here's the permission slip, because it seems like a lot of us need one. You worked for this. For decades you showed up and contributed, and deferred, and saved, and sacrificed. And your past self did that specifically so your present self could have this freedom. Honoring that sacrifice doesn't mean hoarding the proceeds. It means using them. It means actually living the life that was always the point of all of it. Let me leave you with this. Right now, somewhere in this country, there is a person in their 40s sitting at a desk they wish they didn't have to sit at, looking at a calendar they didn't design, counting the years until they can have what you have today. They are dreaming about your Tuesday. They are dreaming about your freedom. You are not waiting for your life to begin. You are in the chapter that all the other chapters were working toward. This is not a consolation prize for getting older. This is the main event. Retirement is not the end of your story. It is the first chapter you've ever gotten to write yourself. And that couple I mentioned at the very beginning, the ones who sat across from me and quietly asked whether they were really allowed to enjoy it, I told them what I'm telling you now. Yes, you've always been allowed. You have more than earned it. And since nobody else is going to walk through your door and hand you an official license to live fully, you are going to have to give yourself one. So consider this yours. Now go use it. If something in this video landed for you, I'd genuinely love to hear about it in the comments. Tell me one thing. What are you most grateful for about where you are right now? Or if you're not yet retired, what's the one thing you're most looking forward to? I read everything, and I think we need more of this kind of conversation online. Less fear, less worst-case spiraling, more honest celebration of something that really is, when you look at it clearly, quite remarkable. Hit subscribe if you want to keep going on this journey together, and I'll see you in the next one.